Hey guys, it's Jayden Clark here from Jazz Lesson Videos, and today we're going to be talking about memorizing chord changes. Now, of course, the tried and tested way of memorizing chord changes is simply looking at a set of changes and playing over them, either arpeggiating them or playing some different exercise over them over and over again until you're able to do that off of the page. But what if I told you there was not only just a better way, but also a way that is much more fun? Well, today I'm going to go over 3 different exercises that you can put into your practice to make the process of memorizing chord changes much more fun and much more efficient as well. Now, you can go ahead and find these 3 exercises plus much more in the Tune Learning Exercises PDF package written by Chad LB. As always, if you want to go ahead and check out this package, do feel free to click the link in the description below. So as most people probably know, the first step when it comes to memorizing chord changes is simply being able to arpeggiate your way through the changes. But once we've done that, what do we go ahead and do next? Well, the next exercise that we're going to move on to now is a cool way that you can actually apply those arpeggios over a set of changes. So before we jump into this arpeggio exercise, the tune that we're going to look at throughout this video is, of course, Have You Met Miss Jones, a really great standard to have in our repertoire. So the next thing that we can do with arpeggios, once we've learned them through a set of changes, is we can start then changing up the order. But of course, the best way to do that is just to pick a set rhythm. And I personally like to go ahead and actually follow the harmonic rhythm of the tune. So if we're looking at this example here now of this arpeggio exercise, you'll notice that we are following the harmonic rhythm. Of course, we've got 1 chord per measure. That's what the harmonic rhythm is, and we're going ahead and arpeggiating using 8th notes, and then we are holding that final 8th note. We're tying that together with that half note to allow for us to follow the harmonic rhythm. Of course, some tunes are going to have 2 chords per measure, so the harmonic rhythm is going to be a little shorter. And of course, more modern tunes may have even more unusual harmonic rhythms when you're putting chords on single beats or you're playing hits or something like that. But as long as we understand what harmonic rhythm is, that's what we're actually following with this particular exercise. So before we get into this, let's actually take a listen to what this sounds like. Okay, so a few things to note about this exercise. Generally, when you're trying to do this, you want to go ahead and hit all of the arpeggio notes. That is 1, 3, 5, 7, and it can be in any order, but we want to try and aim to hit all 4 of those. And you'll notice when looking at this exercise, it does exactly that. So the first measure, we are starting from the 1, we've got the 3, and then we move up to the 7, and then to the 5. And of course, to measure 2, we start from the 1 again, but we descend to the 7th, down to the 3rd, so we skip the 5th there before landing on the 5th. And the 3rd measure, we can see that we actually start on the 3rd here, we descend to the root, the 5th, and then we land on the 7th. And of course, this continues throughout this chorus here, as you can see. Now, of course, when you're going ahead and applying something like this yourself without playing over a reference like we have in front of us, it's important to play slowly. We want to give ourselves enough time to pick apart the different permutations, the different arpeggio combinations, while also making sure that we hit every note in the arpeggio. That is, we want to hit 1, 3, 5, and 7, just in whatever order you want. So now that we've gotten a little deeper into our arpeggio practice, let's start using the entire chord scale. Now, a chord scale, as the name may suggest, is simply a scale that goes with a particular chord. So, for example, in Have You Met Miss Jones, of course, we're starting there on concert F major 7. Well, an F major scale is going to fit pretty nicely over an F major 7. In fact, it's going to fit exactly over an F major 7. At D7, of course, that next chord there, you're going to be using D mixolydian. G minor 7, you're going to use G Dorian, etc. So these are the scales that belong to those given chords. Of course, the reason to practice our chord scales, just like the reason we practice arpeggios, is to get as inside of the harmony as we possibly can, thus helping us to better memorize the chord changes. So let's go ahead and check out an example here of a chord scale solo over Have You Met Miss Jones. Of course, this example comes from the Tune Learning Exercises PDF package written by Chad LB. So let's go ahead and check it out. So as we can see in this example, we are using only chord scales. Even just starting off there, we can see we're only using notes from the F major scale, we're only using notes from the D mixolydian scale, only using notes from the G Dorian scale, etc., so on and so forth. Of course, it's important to note, even though we are using the entire chord scale now, we are still aiming to put arpeggio notes on those strong beats, that is beats 1 and 3. This helps us sound out the harmony as clear as we possibly can. So you'll even see the solo starts on the 5th. On beat 3 there, we've got the 3rd. That's of the F major 7 chord. Moving on to the next chord, we resolve to the 5th on beat 1. You've got the 3rd on beat 3. Even measure 3, we've got the 3rd, the minor 3rd on beat 1. And we've got a slightly delayed resolution to the root note on that beat 3 and. But you can see as you go throughout this solo, you'll notice that is the pattern. Most of the time, we're putting chord tones on those strong beats. So you might be wondering now, how can we go ahead and put together a solo using only chord scales? How do we work up to something like this example? Well, the best place to start is by simply using only quarter notes. So let's take a listen to what I could come up with using only quarter notes and only chord scales over Have You Met Miss Jones. Now, of course, when using only quarter notes, it gives us time to think about what is coming next. Of course, another way you can do it, you don't have to use only eighth notes, but you can start combining a bunch of rhythms. You can start using a little bit of space. You can start constructing melodies. So here's another example I came up with, starting to combine a bunch of different rhythms. This is how I personally like to practice chord scale soloing. Now, so far, we've covered a lot of diatonic exercises. We've gone through arpeggios, of course, chord scale soloing. Now is a good time to add a little bit of chromaticism, because by now we've probably got the changes pretty well solidified in our ear. Maybe we still don't have it completely off of the page just yet. We might not be able to spell out every single change if somebody asked us to. So now's a good time to add some chromaticism. Now, of course, when adding chromaticism, what's a good way to practice that? Well, just like we were doing and thinking about with our chord scale soloing, putting chord tones on strong beats, we can go ahead and do that, and we can fill in the gaps with approach notes. So this is a 2-note approach note exercise. Let's go ahead and quickly take a listen to it. So, as I mentioned, you can see chord tones on strong beats. In that first measure there, we've got the root there on beat 1, and we've got the 5th there on beat 2. And to fill in the gaps, we are using 2-note chromatic approach notes. So you can see we've got that chromatic step down to the 5th, and then we have a chromatic enclosure to the 5th on beat 1 of the second measure. And then we then have another enclosure of the 3rd there on beat 3, before using a couple of chromatic approach notes. These are descending approach notes to the root note on beat 1 of measure 3. Now, of course, this pattern continues throughout the entire example. Now, what this does is it forces us to use good voice leading. Now, of course, you could argue that the chord scale soloing also does that, but when we're combining arpeggio notes and chord scales, sometimes we may not always use stepwise motion, right? We might not always use the smoothest option to lead to that chord tone on the strong beat, whereas using these chromatic approach notes, we are always going to be using the smoothest option, right? We're always going to be getting to those chord tones by a half step, which is good voice leading. Now, just memorizing an example like this is going to go a long way to helping our vocabulary and go a long way to actually memorizing the changes that you're practicing this over. But how can we also apply something like this? Well, I like to go ahead and try and simply apply these kinds of patterns into an actual solo. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what I could come up with by using chromatic approach notes in a solo. So I'm not just putting chord tones on downbeats and then playing that consistent rhythm. I'm actually going to play an actual solo, but I'm going to concentrate on using pretty much as many approach notes and enclosures as I can in the most melodic way possible. So here's what I could come up with. So if you made it that far in your practice, you've gone through the arpeggios, you've gone through the chord scales, and you've gone ahead and subsequently added some chromaticism, it's almost certain that you are going to have the changes memorized, even if you haven't once yet looked away from the page. Those changes are going to be so ingrained in your ear, they're going to be so ingrained in your mind, and you're going to have so many different ways you can actually approach those changes that there's almost no way that that tune is not going to be memorized. And of course, exercises like these can really take the monotony out of practice because you get a reference, and then of course you have plenty of different ways in which you can apply that reference in order to further extend yourself with those exercises. Now, of course, as I've mentioned, you can find all of these exercises plus much more in the Tune Learning Exercises PDF package written by Chad LB, and of course you can find that link in the description below. Of course, don't forget to click the like, subscribe, and the bell button so you always know when we release new content. As always, feel free to let us know what you'd like us to check out next by leaving a comment below as well. Really actually helps the algorithm. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.